Coogs house. All right, the Houston Cougars win a big one, 69-48 over the Cincinnati Bearcats to head to the American Athletic Conference Championship game for the fifth consecutive year, and that is somehow not the biggest news out of Fort Worth today.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars Daily Podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Antros, to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That we the latest on the Cougs into your news feed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome back to YouTube channel. It's good to see you again. It's good to see each other a lot more these days. We're doing every day after conference tournament games. Welcome back. Remember, we're going to give away something big at 1,000. We're still trying to work towards what that is. But to make sure we get there and you get something, hit subscribe so we go to 1,000 subscribers, and then leave a thumbs up and a comment down below so we know who to give stuff to. If after today's episode we're talking about the Cincinnati game and the ensuing what appears to be Memphis game, you have no idea what to say, tell us what your favorite event at the rodeo is. It's that time of year. All right, so in this, there's kind of fluid segments here. I want to talk some about Cincinnati. I want to talk some about what looks like the Memphis game on Sunday. However, we also need to talk some in this first segment about Marcus Sasser. Now, Marcus Sasser went down just 13 minutes into the basketball game, about 7 minutes left in the first half. And frankly, it looked scary. He tried to cross over left to right and just collapsed. Cincinnati went the other way, and the camera followed the ball as they went down and had a fast break, whatever. And then it panned back, and Marcus was on the ground in a lot of pain. Now, obviously, just in general, you don't want to see injuries in any kind of sports game. I don't mean to say that this is somehow elevated just because it's Marcus Sasser, but it's also Marcus Sasser, and he's like the backbone of the team in so many ways. I mean, just yesterday, Houston's offense was struggling to get out the gates in a sleepwalking kind of game to open up the tournament. And he had 30 points, right? Like, he's that kind of a guy. He's that kind of a guy. And I'd argue he's actually a better defender. But it sounds like it was not knee. I mean, they were very quick to point out there's not a knee kind of injury. It looked like they had stem machine stuff tied to his groin. Everyone's assuming it looks like a groin strain was the official word out of Houston. And everyone's assuming that looks correct based on how the injury went, how like him walking around and stuff went. That's a shame because A, it's a really crucial time of year, and B, that really impacts side-to-side type of movements. They have not said whether or not he'd play on Sunday. I imagine it's the kind of thing where he warms up and tries it out, right? Not that he's going to go work out. He's going to warm up, and if it feels okay, he may try, and if it's not, he may sit. I will say it sounded like in the post-game press conference that Kelvin Sampson said he was going to be err on the side of caution, I guess is the phrase. Kelvin Sampson said that a number of different times in referencing what they're going to do with Marcus, and kudos to them on that. It'd be really easy to get selfish and greedy and not go that way, but that's the way they went, right? That's the way they went. Now, I think the interesting thing is that probably means he doesn't play on Sunday because there's no way he's like even 80% if it's a strain groin tomorrow. Strain's not a tear, right? That's a good sign. And frankly, we know if we're assuming things, he did walk off the floor, which would make me think it's not a tear, but a strain's a good thing as far as this goes. The interesting thing is that people have been slotting Houston to play their first round games in Alabama. Birmingham has hosting some games that's kind of the closest geographically to the third ward, and that would mean that they'd play their 16 versus 1 game on Thursday, and then the second game or the round of 32 game on Saturday. The interesting thing to me in that is that if I'm assuming he doesn't play Sunday, and if he does not play Sunday, I think you can almost chalk it up that he is not playing in the round of 64 as well, just as a precaution. That's a team that Houston ought to be able to handle, whoever it is, that should be a team that Houston can handle without him. It's a 16 seed that has only happened once, so don't act like it can't happen. But by and large, Houston should be able to beat a 16 seed without Marcus Sasser on the floor. The question then becomes, can he go on the Saturday probable or Sunday game in the round of 32? I'm not going to lie to you. There are teams out there. We'll do a whole bracket breakdown when those are out. There are teams out there in the round of 32 that's an 8-9 seed kind of team that do match up like in that range and that are good at the things Houston's bad at. I don't mean to say that that's like a scary thought that Houston could get upset. Everyone get upset every day, but that may be the kind of game that you do need Marcus for. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, can we get him back? How's he looking at that point? So I imagine he's out probably on Sunday unless he wakes up and feeling a lot better. He may suit up and go through warmups though. So, Watch that happen. I'd imagine that he's also out Thursday or Friday, probably Thursday, regardless of who the opponent is and regardless of where they're going. The question to me becomes next weekend. That's a 1 week later kind of thing on what's really a 3 to 4 week injury. Marcus is a tough kid. I don't mean to say he's not or anything like that. That to me is much more where question marks start to arise. We will know more throughout the week. Obviously, I don't want to project too much, but in what looks like, and I'm pulling up the score because we're recording during the game, but Memphis is up by nearly 30. And so Houston will likely play Memphis. Let's just go and say they'll play Memphis on Sunday. And against Memphis, in the first game, Marcus had 20 points in a relatively close contest and played a fairly important role. In the second game, Marcus had just 13, but the way Memphis had to cover him defensively took a lot of focus off of a lot of other guys in a gritty game there in Memphis, Tennessee. So it's hard to beat a good team 3 times. It's kind of the consistent thing you see. They beat Cincinnati 3 times, but Memphis is better. And so what do they look like on Sunday without Marcus against Memphis? Reports indicate that there's a lot of Memphis folks there in Fort Worth at these games. And to that, I say, you got to remember this team was an Elite 8 team without Sasser or Tremont Mark a year ago. And I'd argue some of the supporting cast is that much stronger. I mean, you've added Jarace Walker, Emmanuel Sharp, and Terrence Arsenault have turned into great defenders. You've got Tremont Mark back. Jamal Shead is a year older, a year wiser, and Juwan Roberts is tremendous. So I think that there's a chance that they win the tournament anyways, right? That they win the American Athletic Conference tournament anyways. I think that's probably why it feels safe to say that they don't end up playing Marcus out the gates. But that said, it's also the kind of thing where it's like if we beat them in the game in their gym when everyone is healthy, we beat them without Kendrick Davis. If we put up a fight, I consider that, putting up a fight, if we can, make it close without Sasser, I feel fairly safe about how we end the Memphis rivalry. I mean, after all, we are the ones going to the Big 12. Now, in diving into the game itself, I want to point out, Sasser went down with 7 minutes left in the half, and Houston was up just 5. They won the game by 21 points. They held Cincinnati to their season low again, which makes them the 9th opponents Houston has held to their season low this year. And that's good for 39% and change of the teams Houston's played this season have had their worst scoring output against Houston. The defense continues to lead the way. Big impact on the defense side of the ball is all of the rebounding efforts you saw. Houston had 44 rebounds on the game. That's really big time. You factor in that Cincinnati had just 32, and Cincinnati's the one with the 7-footer, the 6'10", all the big guys, right? And Houston's able to out-muscle them for the rebound 44 different times. They also, for what it's worth, had a pair of blocks, 6 steals. They forced Cincinnati into 9 turnovers, right? Defense was tremendous. I thought it was interesting, and what someone needs to get the analytical stat on is Houston not only forced the 9 turnovers, they were also able to get Cincinnati into a lot of at the buzzer of the shot clock, late clock, bad shots. And those function like turnovers, and then they get statted like turnovers. And that's defense continues to win this team championships, continues to be a key part of Houston's culture. Also worth noting in this game, Houston dominated the paint. Remember the exact same Cincinnati I just talked about that had all those size, and it's that's surprising that Houston out-rebounded them. Houston scored 38 points in the paint. Cincinnati scored just 12. The 9 offensive rebounds proved to be very, very important. Jarace Walker, Juwan Roberts, and Terrence Arsenault each had 2, and each went back up and either got points or free throws that led to points on the ensuing putbacks. Houston, for what it's worth, offensively did shoot the ball poorly, just 3-15 from the 3-point line, but shot 50% on the game. I think what's interesting in that is they focused so much on getting the ball into the paint, and Victor Lakin for Cincinnati, who had 7 blocks in the quarterfinal game, had just 1 block in the conference semifinal. That means they're taking smart paint shots or attacking, getting into the body, either getting fouls or going around arms at the rim, create big time finishes at the rim. The big noticeable thing was that Juwan Roberts had a much more impactful game after making no field goals and having no points for the first time this season. I guess no points for the first time this season. Juwan came out and led the team with 16 points and 8 rebounds. Jamal Shead also had 16 points and 9 assists. For what it's worth, Houston had 15 assists on 29 made shots. So just over half of their shots came on assisted baskets. I thought it was interesting, though, that they were super, super intentional about what to do to get Juwan Roberts the ball. So I drew it up a little bit on my handy coaches board here. So Houston's always run this floppy set to start the game, right? Where they run the guards off the side to side, and then end up having a post ball screen for the other post. And what they did in this instance was they actually had Jawan ball screen for Jarace. They actually typically have the invert, because what ends up happening is that guy, flipping around here, ends up popping up to the free throw line to the nail area. They then get Sasser to input the ball or drop down to the post. Cincinnati doubled Jarace. Jarace has killed Cincinnati all year long and killed him on Saturday. And Jawan took it from there, drove straight to his left hand, put a left hand hookup off the glass, got his own putback, and the game just started rolling from there. That kind of intention out of Houston, Jawan, etc., to get him involved early led to Post being involved all game long. Even Javier Francis's big dunk when he came in late was a tremendous momentum time and booster for Houston, and they rode that all the way through. The highlights of this one are great. Jamal Shead put on a show in the second half. It was like someone told him at halftime, hey, Sass is out, you got to turn it on, and he did. Now, I want to move on for a second to talk some about Memphis and what that game will look like. But first, let's talk a little bit about our buddies at FanDuel. That's because new customers will place a no-sweat first bet can get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if they place that bet with America's #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel. It's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything: money line to point scores and threes drained. They currently, even after the Sasser injury, and they are updating these things very, very quickly, still have Houston at plus 550 to win the whole thing. They have Houston also at plus 115 to get to the Final Four. They seem to think that this injury is not going to slight them a whole lot, and I don't either. I think, like I said, I think he's back next week, and so we'll see where things go from there. FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a bigger payout with the same game parlay, so don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so as we continue to look down the road here, Houston plays Memphis for the third time this season in the American Athletic Conference Championship game, and their entire goal is to make it not like last year. Last season, Memphis beat Houston twice in the regular season, and Houston turned around and won it in the title game. And frankly, Houston has beaten them twice this season, and it would make sense that would be the same way this thing goes. I mean, after all, it is ridiculously difficult to beat a team 3 different times. I will say that beating them in their gym feels like a whole big win to me, that it kind of like surmounts all these kinds of things. But we can talk about the kind of stuff after the season. The thing that'll be interesting to me was, assuming Sasser does not play, because I don't think he will, what does Houston do to replace him? Out the half, in the semifinal game, they put Terrence Arsenault in the game, which I think is a good defensive replacement. Arsenault has turned into a great defender. And I've said on Twitter 1,000 times, it feels like at this point, I really love watching that kid grow this season. He's done a little bit of a positional kind of change from his high school team. He's tall, he's long, he's aggressive. He's got a decent looking jump shot, but he is a intense competitor for sure. And while he's still picking up some of the nuances of the offense and the calls, I feel like it's interesting watching him grow as a defender. And I think that he does a really good job of using his length as advantage. It'll be interesting to see what he does down the stretch of the Memphis game without Sasser, because I'm sure he's going to get a lot more minutes. For instance, in the first matchup with Memphis, he got just 2 minutes against the Bearcats, where I pull it up right here. I just had it. Oh, he got 28 minutes. So again, like a lot more minutes ought to be put on his shoulders. Emmanuel Sharp, I think, is the more offensive kind of guy to put in the game. While Sharp has not shot the ball particularly well as of late, he is also being guarded differently than he was to start the season. On the season, he's still a 34% three-point shooter. 35% three-point shooter. It's just 34% in the last month. And that indicates, obviously, he started off the season fairly hot. I think what's interesting is teams now know who he is, and they're falling on him off screens in a different kind of way. I don't know which one gets the nod to start out of those two, but I do think it's one of those two that gets the nod to start. And then the other one also played 25, 27 minutes, right? Like they're going to have to split the role and shoulder it some. I do think of the leadership replacement for Sasser, because Sasser is such a lead by example kind of guy in so many ways. It's hard to replace that. That guy, to me, in this game against Memphis is going to have to be Jamal Shead, not just because he stuck the dagger in Memphis the last time these two teams played, but because that is just We've heard Kelvin Sampson talk about the point guard. That is just his role in this program. And it's also kind of who he is as a person. So we'll see where he goes from there. I wonder, work with me here, if you see Houston also go to kind of a 3 big lineup at some point, right? So do you see Jamal Shead and Tremont Mark as the 2 guards, and then Jarace Walker at a 3, because he can shoot the ball and do a lot of outside kinds of things, and then you see like a Chaney and a Roberts inside. I've been asking for a giant lineup all season. I kind of wanted Mark at the point because I wanted shooting, but I'll take what I can get, right? And that would be interesting because one of the things Memphis does really well is they've got so much size. DeAndre Williams is a big guy. Malcolm Dandridge is a big guy. They got so much size that it feels like that'd be an interesting way to go about this. And it'd be in a third time you're playing a team, it'd be a unique way to go about that third matchup. As far as what they got to keep from happening against Memphis in this third matchup, it starts and ends with Kendrick Davis. And I don't mean that in a way that's like, awe-inspiring or nuanced. Like, everyone that watches them play has seen this happen. The kid's getting 23 points a game. Like, that doesn't happen on accident. The thing I think is almost more dangerous about Davis is not his 22, 23 points per game, but his 5.6 assists per game. He's also a creator once you start to play him differently. And so I'm not saying they should let him get 30, but I'm saying it's almost like if you make him one-dimensional, you can kind of limit what they do. Now, I imagine, especially with Marcus out, that's a Jamal Shead matchup. Jamal Shead cannot get in foul trouble covering this kid because he's Houston's best shot to slow him down, right? The fouls on Saturday were heavily one-sided. It ended up being 22-16, but if you're following me on Twitter, I keep track of these things. And at one point in the first half, it was 10-3 before they rattled off 3 quick questionable fouls on Cincinnati. It feels like that happens a couple times. It's happened a couple times to Houston over the course of the season. Now, in slowing down Kendrick Davis, Jamal Shead will have to be physicals. I'm not saying he has to change that aspect of who he is. It's just interesting to see how they call this game. Now, Memphis is long, Memphis is athletic, Memphis is strong. Houston seems content to let them shoot the 3. And frankly, in both Memphis games, Memphis shot the 3 better in those 2 games than they have the entire season. It feels like time for a regression to the mean. That means the shots coming back down from the 40% they shot in the first game or the 34% they shot in the second game down to where they've been shooting in the season, right? They haven't been getting this giant chunk of their points from behind the 3-point line. And can Houston kind of weather that storm and get them to come back to earth? It's going to feel like an actual split crowd. Both teams are very well represented in Fort Worth. It's going to be exciting, exciting, exciting. With all of that said, I think that we can safely assume that Sampson is going to coach his butt off, and like the defensive scheme may be something we're not used to seeing, because in the second half, late second half especially, of that game in Memphis, we saw Houston go to a zone after I'd frankly, full honesty moment, been critical of them in zone, right? They went to a zone in that instance in a moment that kind of caught Memphis off guard, and they didn't really know what they were doing and took a lot longer to score, which slowed their own run down. That makes me think that there's going to be something happen in this game from Sampson you haven't seen before in a good way. And you also have to imagine that when he played Memphis the first 2 times, he knew there was a chance he'd play them a third time in the conference championship game. As far as how this plays out in the big picture, before we get to the game, we'll obviously talk about it after the game as well. But I don't know that the qualitative elements of this game will have a whole lot to do with Memphis or Houston's seeding. The quantitative part might, the actual score and who wins, it might. But even that might be kind of questionable because the game tips off at 2:15 and Selection Sunday starts like a couple hours later, right? A few hours later. And so they might have okay, if Houston wins, they go here. If Houston loses, they go there. If Memphis wins, they go here. If Memphis wins, they go there. But the reality is, I don't know if the selection committee will be watching this game to see what does Houston look like without Sasser. What does Houston look like with Terrence Armstrong? I don't know that all those things can happen. And so that will be interesting to follow and see. And throw in the comments down below, does Houston just have to win an ugly game anyway, regardless of who's on the floor, and lock up that number 1 seed? Now, I don't know that it matters as long as you're not in the bracket where you're playing Kansas in Kansas or something like that. I don't know that it necessarily matters because no court or no region goes through anywhere close to Houston. Like we could all jump on a flight to Vegas and that'd be a ton of fun, but that's a long way away. Kansas City's a long way away. Louisville's a long way away, and we know New York City, as much fun as it would be to play out there, is a long way away. So I don't know that I care that much about that, but I do think that the qualitative aspects of how Houston looks in this game are going to get lost in the shuffle. They might just be paying attention to who wins and who loses, and if that even matters. We're going to be following it all Sunday long here at Locked On Cougs. Make sure you follow me at Painsworth512. That's Pains WORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all of your social media handles. I'll be happy to talk all things Cougs all game long. Football spring practice are coming up. We got to get caught up on that too. That's probably someday next week. We'll talk about that and get caught up on that as well. Got baseball season starting. I can talk Rockets, Astros, spring practice, whatever you want to have. Talk about Houston sports. We can talk about that at Painsworth 512 and all your social media handles. Pains WORTH 512 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and everything. So thank you so much for listening to Locked On Cougs today, making us, I guess if it's Saturday evening, your second, third, fourth listen, or Sunday morning for your first listen. And if you're looking for another listen or your next listen, I'm recommending Locked On College Basketball because they're covering the entire nation this March Madness in a very, very thorough way. So shout out to Andy and Isaac for that one. Thank you all so much for listening to Locked On Cougs today. Locked On Cougs, a proud member of Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.